The Reverend Dr. William Watty was a towering figure in our lifetime, a pivotal figure in the history of the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and the Americas. I can speak of Reverend Watty's unmistakable love for the South Caribbean district of the Methodist Church. He served our district with distinction as Superintendent Minister of the North Trinidad and South Trinidad circuits, and as District Chairman and General Superintendent from 1987 to 1992. At his induction as District Chairman and General Superintendent, Reverend Watty pointed to the need for us to become an authentically Caribbean church, fully embracing the use of the steel pan in worship and having a deep appreciation for the different musical styles which have emerged from among us, like soca, calypso, and reggae. He also invited us to consider carefully the place of children and young people in the life and witness of the church. This, I believe, began in the South Caribbean district, a major shift in our theological reflection and how ministry is exercised from a Eurocentric to a more Caribbean-centric exploration. Reverend Watty was an exemplar in many ways, a theologian of the highest quality, a caring pastor, and a meticulous administrator. One laity in the region noted that the churches and the people of the Caribbean owe to Reverend Watty an incalculable debt of gratitude for the immense part he played in helping to cultivate the post-colonial consciousness and identity of so many in our beloved region. Yet, for others, Reverend Watty will simply be remembered for his sermons, which demonstrated eloquence, great intellect, and a post-colonial interpretation and application. His vision, values, courage, and unquenchable faith were hallmarks of his character and focused leadership approach. He felt that the church in the Caribbean was mature enough to determine its own future, and therefore refused to accept the church as it was, but dreamed of what it could be. During the years that he served the church as connectional president, the Reverend Dr. Watty continued to make himself available to the South Caribbean district, and as such was invited back to the South Caribbean district and to the Kingston-Chateaubelair circuit in particular, several times each year, for renewal of covenant, Alders Gate celebration, public lectures on the history of Methodism. He conducted training in Bible with young people. Who could forget the sermon, The Bamboo Christian, or Methodism, The Sleeping Giant? When Reverend Watty demitted office as connectional president, his relationship with the South Caribbean district remained unchanged and continued into retirement and eventually into death. As a supernumerary, Reverend Watty facilitated an extensive, life-changing, ministry-altering training and retooling exercise with the entire ministerial staff of the South Caribbean district, going from territory to territory. Additionally, he conducted special training for the younger clergy in the district. As recent as April 12, 2020, Reverend Watty was invited by the Methodist Church of Barbados to preach the sermon for the Festival of the Resurrection. This service was online. Therefore, Reverend Watty preached from this very pulpit in this church, and the recording was sent to us. That service was eventually viewed by over 9,000 households from across the world. Reverend Watty said to me, "Derick, this is the greatest honor that has ever been given to me in all my years in ministry, that I have been asked to preach to an international audience." He said, whenever he's invited by the South Caribbean District to preach, he wore his South Caribbean District President stole to confirm his love and devotion for the South Caribbean District. Reverend Watty riveted in us the need to respect and serve the peoples of our region. He impressed upon us the need to respect our institutions, traditions, and those who represented them, while being fearless in defending our convictions. When the church or region was in a crisis, we looked to Reverend Watty for a prophetic word. This shows the stature of the man and the esteem in which he is held in our church and our region. Reverend Watty had been a wonderful example and inspiration to many of us, and we have admired his approach to family, church, community, country, and the world. Reverend Watty was a pastor's pastor, a true bishop. On a personal level, I give thanks to God for Reverend Watty, whom God used to be a part of my salvation and called to ministry narrative. It was at a Vision Alive rally in Arnesville Methodist Church in St. Vincent and the Grenadines in 1997. Reverend Watty was the preacher, and after the sermon and the altar call, and after ministering to the many people who came to the altar, Reverend Watty looked in my direction and, pointing his finger, said, "Young man, how much longer do you intend to run? Don't you know that God has been calling you to full-time ministry? Why don't you surrender?" At the altar I came, and Reverend Watty did not only pray with me and for me, but prophesied over my life. It was easy, therefore, to become a friend of Reverend Watty, and that's what I call him, a friend who journeyed with me in a special way. After being appointed district president of the South Caribbean District, he became a close friend, a sounding board, a mentor. As I close, I want to borrow the words of the Reverend Dr. Burchell Taylor, a contemporary of Reverend Dr. Watty, that he spoke concerning another colleague who was their contemporary, and allow me to insert the name of Reverend Watty. Reverend William Watty was a servant with a difference. A servant who was not only transformed into a friend by Christ, but one who was taken into the confidence of Christ, and one who was also tasked with a productive mission by Christ to the glory of God. On behalf of the ministers, officers, members, and friends of the Methodist Church in the South Caribbean District, and on my own personal behalf, I wish to express sincere condolences to Mrs. Watty, your daughters, and the rest of the Watty family. Be assured of our continued prayers and thoughts. And the South Caribbean pledges to ensure that the legacy of the Reverend Dr. William Wilberforce Watty continues to bless generations that are not yet. Thank you.